When we're feeling stuck and unhappy or frustrated, it's easy to focus on the negative and on all of the things that we don't want. In other words, it's much easier to always just assume the worst than to make yourself vulnerable and to imagine all of the amazing things that could happen. And if you're like me, then you beat yourself up for thinking negative thoughts because deep down you know that you're supposed to assume the very best of yourself, of others, of situations, and of your life generally. I recently rewatched the Disney Pixar movie Inside Out. If you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend it. It's about the life of a young girl and the 5 emotions that help guide her and shape her life. It's a great story. And one of the lessons that it reminded me of was that all of our emotions are important. You wouldn't know real joy unless you've experienced sadness. And it's not realistic or healthy even to constantly force yourself to be positive if it's at the expense of suppressing your other emotions like anger or fear or disgust. In the same way, I thought about why we as humans naturally assume the worst. And for me, it is out of fear. Fear of failure, fear of being inadequate, fear of being unlovable. And depending on what the activity is, like skydiving for example, it's a legitimate fear of death and that instinct that kicks in to protect us. But rather than beat myself up, I thought to myself, hey, if my mind is going to go there naturally and assume the worst, then why don't I just accept it and confront it? Why don't I just assume the worst and put it out there? Take my job for example. When I got laid off, I thought that the worst possible thing that would ever happen is that I would never ever find another job ever again. Or when I started making my videos, my biggest fear was that not a single person would watch them, or worse, people would watch them and think that they were stupid or make fun of them. When you articulate the worst, most scariest thing that could possibly happen, then you can do something with that. You either hear out loud how ridiculous and highly unlikely that your worst fear is actually going to come true, or else you realize that really bad things have already happened and you were strong enough to get through it. When I was laid off, I wasn't working for about 8 months, and there were times when I didn't think that I would find a job, and I was still okay. So if you find yourself assuming the worst, then don't beat yourself up. In fact, embrace it. Go ahead and assume the worst. Just don't stay there. Verbalize what the very worst outcome could be in a given situation, and then be honest and brave enough with yourself to determine whether that fear is worth limiting yourself over.